Back in session, and our next candidate is from Gale Associates.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bill Seymour. I'm the Director of Civil Engineering for Gale, and with me tonight is Maggie Jakes, our environmental engineer, Jeff Georges, our landscape architect, and John Perry, who would be the senior civil designer on our team. We'll talk a little bit more about the project team in just a second. When I talked to Matt about the interview tonight, he suggested that what you'd like to do is to have us make a 5-minute introductory statement, take some questions from you, and then make a 5-minute closing statement somewhere when you tell us it's appropriate.
Exactly.
We had put together about a 40-minute presentation, which we're not going to give, but we may call upon it as we get questions that draw upon the subject matter in our presentation. In your blue handouts tonight is a full copy of the slides in our presentation. You'll also find our business cards if you forget our names. And by the way, I should thank you for the concert while we were waiting downstairs. We heard your concert for Sunday. I assume it's Sunday, and it was pretty impressive.
No, it's Wednesday, actually.
Then they got some work to do. Just kidding.
That's funny.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Gale tonight in our first few minutes. We're then going to take your questions, and then John's going to make some concluding comments about schedule and process, keys to success, and I'll make a quick closing statement, and we'll call it a night and try to fight the fog going home. So let's see if we can get this to work. Super. Gale Associates, most of you, I think, probably know us. We're located in nearby Weymouth. We're about a 120-person firm, 100-person firm. One of the things that makes us different is that we're truly a multidiscipline architectural engineering firm. There's virtually no contingency on your project, and we don't know a lot about your project at this point. I don't think you do. We've got to go through the program development process. But regardless of where that takes us, we have the in-house services, whether it be traffic, whether it be landscape, whether it be structural, or building architecture, or environmental, geotechnical, civil, and certainly sports. Sports is our strong point. We are a sports consulting company, first and foremost. I did want to touch upon the fact that we are local. Jeff is our lead landscape architect. He's only been with us for about a week. He was not included in our proposal to begin with, but Jeff has been working with Gale as a contract hire since the late 90s. When I joined Gale, Jeff joined us as well. We've hired him full-time. We're very excited about that. Jeff lives in Hull. Maggie lives in Quincy. John lives in Marshfield, and I live in Pembroke. We're a South Shore firm. Why that's important to you is once we get into construction, hopefully we will, we want to be particularly responsive. When you need us to be on the job site, we can be so fairly expeditiously. Talk a little bit about awards, and I'm only going to mention it because we won a very prestigious award this week. Last weekend I was in Arizona, and we were awarded the American Sports Builders Association Track and Field Facility of the Year. It's very unusual for a high school project to be so selected. Most of them are collegiate or higher caliber track and field facilities. The track and field facility at Norwell High School was selected to be the National 2015 Facility of the Year, and we're very proud of that among all of our awards. To say that we are sports consultants is really a bit understated. In the last 15 years, we've consulted on over 100 track and field facilities. We've consulted on over 180 infill synthetic turf fields. You've got a complete list in your binder. You can ask us questions about any one of them, and you can certainly call any of our clients heretofore. They're all listed there. A little bit about the project team. I would be your project manager. I've been with Gale for about 18 years. The only other job I ever had was 26 years in the United States Army, and joined Gale out of Bosnia about 18 years ago, and have been doing sports consulting ever since. How those two came together, I'm not quite certain, but we're pretty good at it. John Perry has also been with us a good deal of time. He would be the senior civil designer on the project. John just finished a baseball combination field in Newburyport. John finished a baseball combination field at Georgetown High School last year as the project manager, a seasoned veteran. Maggie, John went to Merrimack. Maggie also went to Merrimack, but joined us after completing her master's in environmental science out of MIT. Her role here would be permitting. Her role would be interfacing with the public as it relates to health and safety and environmental concerns having to do with turf. That's a role that she's just finishing up right now in Wellesley High School and at Concord Carlisle High School before that. Jeff, as I said, is new to our team, but not new to Gale. Jeff is a registered landscape architect. He does very high-end residential development. He does commercial development, and we're making him into a sports consultant. And if you've got questions tonight about how we would address the aesthetics of your site, creating a sense of place, creating a sense of arrival, opportunities for donor recognition or memorialization, certainly screening and taking the edges off of the property, that's Jeff George's role on the property. Finally, I'd like to just touch on Wendy Hocko, the CAD designer at the bottom. Wendy's been at Gale. She's the first person I hired 18 years ago. She has done the CAD drafting of every project that I'm going to show you tonight. She's the one that makes us efficient and cost-effective and well integrated as a team. And she lives in Weymouth. This chart just says that this team's been together a long time. This is a combined experience chart that looks at all of the various public high school projects we've done and who's participated as members of your project team. I'm going to flip through these quickly. We did the first infill synthetic turf field in New England. In 1999, it was UMass Lowell. I was the designer, and we've done, like I said, about 180 since then, and about an equal number of grass fields. We're not turf consultants, we're sports facilities consultants, but we certainly have done our share. Dartmouth baseball and football, Holyoke Stadium, Attleboro, Needham, North Quincy and Quincy, Newton South, North Andover, Neshoba, Acton, Boxborough, North Reading, Melrose, East Long Meadow, Brockton. Some private work, St. Anselm's, LaSalle, Roger Williams, Bishop Fian, Salve Regina, St. Francis Xavier, the only Canadian project ever to receive the American Sports Builders Distinguished Facility designation, Bridgewater State University. Talk quickly about the most recent. Norwell we touched on. John was the project manager for a 4-field project in Medway and Shepherd Hill Regional High School. John was the project manager for Linfield High School. I was the project manager for Portsmouth High School down in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Why do you care about that? You care about that experience because of the lessons learned derived from having done that much work every day, central to our business discipline. We've administered the installation of, I think, 20 different turf systems. Some slit film, some monofilament, some dual tone, some dual fiber, some knitted nylon. We've done all kinds of different pads and shock pads. We've done all kinds of different infill structures. We've done alternative infill structures, which I suspect you may want to talk about at some point. We've learned lessons with regard to shock attenuation, laser grading, base construction, drainage facilities, curb anchors, seaming techniques, marking techniques, and all that goes with it. And that's why it's important that we bring to bear the experience that we bring to bear. The same is true as track surfaces. You're doing a small jogging track. I say small. It turns out that it's a 1/4 mile if we circumscribe the complex that there is today. And if we go to 2 or 3 lanes, 42 inches per lane, and a little bit of surfacing, it's still important that we can help you make decisions with regard to whether it's latex or whether it's urethane, whether it's pervious or impervious, whether it's 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch. We can help you make those decisions and help you understand the cost implications of having done so. We've also done a lot of consulting relative to infill synthetic turf and track facilities within a marine environment. Saunders Stadium in South Boston is immediately on the shore. Roger Williams University is right on the shore of Narragansett. Portsmouth High School, similarly located. Portsmouth Abbey School, you can see the ocean in the background on that slide. So all of these fields have been in for 4 or 5 years in a decidedly marine environment, and we can give you good insights with regard to how they perform accordingly. Similarly, we've done boatloads of projects in floodplains. Framingham State is in the floodplain of the Sudbury River. Winchester is in the floodplain of the Aberjona River. And we can talk about the inundation of fields and what the implications are related to that. So that's a quick overview of our project team, some of our related experience and why I think that's important to assist you, who we are, where we're located. And with that, we'll take your first round of questions, and then we'll jump into some concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this is intended to be a brief answer, so since you have submitted...
What are you trying to say?
That's what it says. We have a pre-programmed set of questions here. Since you submitted your whole proposal in November, how many other jobs has your firm obtained and assigned the same key people during the projected time period of the whole project?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that two ways. We picked up a baseball stadium project at Rollins College in Florida, but that staff is coming out of our Baltimore office. And the other significant job that we picked up is a baseball softball complex at Brown University. I am the project manager for that, but there's a professional engineer by the name of Sean Boyd who will be running the civil design and programming of that job. The landscape architect will be a young woman by the name of Leisha Lee. So it's a distinctly different team. The CAD drafting will be a guy by the name of Eris Malvridis. And he will also do the survey on your project. So there's some cross leveling, but that's the most significant job that we've picked up in the interim.
Okay, thank you. Now, as you may know, the bonding authority for the proposed whole community walking track and turf field project was approved at a special town meeting held in October. The article was brought forward through a citizens petition, and the whole school committee was not part of the planning or information gathering for the project. Now, as such, the whole school committee would like for a design firm to, 1, assess the current condition of the field, 2, consider the current and potential uses of the field, and 3, develop a cost-benefit analysis comparing a natural grass turf option with a synthetic turf option. Now, can you please describe your firm's experience with natural grass turf fields and preparing such a cost-benefit analysis?
The most recent one that we did in detail was in Hingham, a similar community. I think they approached the project in a similar way, and they vetted grass versus turf. First of all, let me answer the first part of your question. As it relates to grass consulting, we do more grass consulting than we do turf consulting. For every turf field we do, there are typically 2 or 3 grass fields in the same campus. We designed the New England Golf Course of the Year, Redtail, out at Fort Devens. We did all the integrated turf management planning and permitting. We do irrigation design, we do engineered root zones and sand-based root zones. So we put together a well-designed, well-drained, high durability, select cultivar, Kentucky bluegrass mixed field. Having said that, we also do a good job, I think, in life cycle cost comparison of the two. We know what it costs to maintain a grass field. We know what it costs to access a grass field. We know what it costs to maintain a turf field and to access a turf field. We know the expected life expectancy of both of those alternatives and when each of them should get reconstructed or renovated. We use net present value theory to bring those cost streams back to today dollars. And what we almost always conclude, and every scenario is different because the maintenance expenditures are different, but what we almost always conclude is that the grass field, in terms of today's dollars, is a better advantage, is a more cost-effective advantage. Now, that doesn't take into account cost per use. At cost per use, it's a 2.5 to 1 typically. Again, we'll do a rough analysis based on your community, but typically the synthetic turf field represents a 2.5 to 1 advantage in terms of cost per use. Obviously, that analysis is very sensitive to what assumptions you make with regard to maintenance and what you're expending today. And you've asked for short answers, but I'll make one more comment.
Sure.
Towns spend more on the maintenance of their fields than they think they do. When you look at equipment depreciation, the cost of materials, the cost of labor, the loss of use while something's being maintained or renovated, when you look holistically at the cost streams associated with the grass alternative and bring those into your model, again, over a 14-year first cycle and a 13 or 14-year second cycle, we go out 2 carpet cycles and bring that back today. It doesn't quite get there. It doesn't quite pay for itself, the carpet, in terms of dollars to dollars.
Okay, Thank you.
I don't understand what that meant, though, the
Sure.
2.5 to 1 times
Yep.
cost per use,
If you
sorry.
take all of the costs associated with a carpet, maintenance, installation, if you take all of the cost stream associated with grass, in a typical community, in a typical scenario, and you use net present value theory at an assumed value of time, value of money,
Right, yep.
bring them back to today's dollars,
Yep.
they're just about even. Grass is a little less expensive.
Okay,
Now, if you divide that by the number of uses that each of those facilities can sustain
Okay.
before they have a breakdown in the root zone, typically it averages 2.5 times more favorable to the synthetic alternative. Does that help?
yes, that's.
I didn't explain
That
it
was
very
the
well.
clarity I needed, so thank you.
Okay. I'm not going to ask all the questions, but I have the first 4.
It's okay.
So,
I'm not going to answer them all either, I don't think. These guys will be mad.
all right. So what percentage of the design work needs to be completed for you to be able to provide a reliable construction budget?
Yep, the first phase. The first phase of the project consists of 2 things, background investigation and program development and schematic design. At that point, we can put you almost within 5% for either alternative. Now, in program development, we're going to ask you 1,000 questions. How do people arrive? How do they depart? Are you going to have gated admission, paid admission? What light levels would you like to consider? And we'll give you the advantage. We're going to take you through a whole program. It's a fairly set, fairly prescribed programming discussion that we have. But coming out of it, we're going to know what it is you want to do, your functional requirements, your priorities, your budget, your schedule. While that's going on, our geotechnical guy, who's a certified soil evaluator, is going to observe a series of test pits. Because until you know what the underlying soil materials are, the groundwater separation, which is particularly dicey in this scenario because of the flood zone and the sandy soils and the proximity of tidal influence to the water table, but until you know infiltration rates, separation from water table, the depth of the loam layer that's there that needs to be removed and taken away, until you know all of that, any schematic design and cost estimating you do is only so much words on paper. We're going to do a utility search to make sure that we're not in conflict with any of the utility profiles that transit the property or that we need to tie into. We're going to do a topographic survey and capture all of the improvements on the parcel. We've already started that because we have good existing conditions plan based on the as-builts that you have, which we've digitized already as part of our planning. So with those 2 things completed, good background investigation, utility soils, topo, property line, and program, we put the 2 together, we run 3 or 4 different scenarios, we do cost testing, we help you reach consensus with regard to what it is you'd like to do as a community, and there we stop.
About what percentage of the,
Of the
total
fee,
yeah.
20 to 25 grand. And that's with full survey geotech and resource area delineation.
Thank you. Now, as you may be aware, the bonding authority for the proposed whole community walking track and turf field project is contingent on the passage of a debt exclusion at town elections, which will likely be held in May of 2016. The funding for design services is immediately available through a different source. However, some in the community have suggested that the school committee wait until the debt exclusion is passed before proceeding with planning for this project. Do you have any thoughts on balancing the need to perform due diligence on the project in advance of a final town vote with the desire not to have wasted money in the event the debt exclusion fails? Is there sort of an optimal percentage of proposed design work that would sort of answer everyone's questions without getting ahead of the process?
No, it's all or nothing. If you want to preserve your opportunity to build something in 2016, we need a notice to proceed with design now. If you don't want to preserve that opportunity, whether or not you do it or not is up to you. If you don't want to preserve that opportunity, you can be very, very comfortable with a May notice to proceed for design, or whenever it comes to fruition. But I think that it's a yes or no question, and the yes or no question is: do you want to build? Not do you want to build something in 2016? Do you want to preserve the opportunity to do so? And if yes, we need to go. because the permitting alone will take 45 days. The bidding alone will take 30 to 40 days. When you factor those things in, if you want to preserve the opportunity to get something built, then you need to issue a notice to proceed now.
Okay, thank you very much. So
Yep.
some of the other members will
I have the
ask
next question. If the debt exclusion does not pass, there is a likelihood that the construction will not happen on the RFP schedule. How has your firm handled this situation in the past? How long can design plans sit on the shelf before there is a cost to the owner? So,
I
how
can
far
answer.
along can we go, I guess?
Would you like to? Sure. So that I'll be quiet. I know the answer.
See if I answer it the same way. So we've done that a handful of times, and King Philip High School, we designed the track and field facility for them 8 years ago, and they didn't have budget to do the synthetic turf field inside of the track, so we designed it so they could do it later on. Fully designed it, and it sat on the shelf for 3-4 years so they could do fundraising. When it came time to get the money to do it, which happened this past fall actually, we spent a week probably dusting the plans off. Some of our lessons learned over the last 4 years came to bear. We updated our details a little bit. It took us probably about a week's worth of time to do that, to get those up to speed where they'd be adequate to bid currently. So it's something that we do quite often. That experience is not atypical.
Two other caveats to that. Number one, this is not a by right project. There is permitting involved. Maggie has done some research related to that. She would be the point person for the permitting exercise. But there would be a notice of, there would be an order of conditions issued pursuant to the project. That has a shelf life of 1 year. You can continue to break ground. It can be extended by request for a second year. And I think after the second year, they have to come back and update your characterization of the resource area. But it can be extended beyond that as well. So that's one caveat. The second caveat is we keep very good track of unit costs. We know what concrete curb costs, we know what carpet costs, we know what asphalt track surfacing, lighting, seating, timing, scoring. We keep those costs very accurately. And every bid season is unique. So one of the considerations in updating your project and getting it out to bid at a later date would be certainly updating the budget. Now, some of those budget numbers will go down. The carpet, if you go synthetic, and I don't want to overuse the term tonight, but if you go synthetic, that is a petroleum-based product, and you've all seen what fuel prices have done. This is a 2,000 truck project, 1,000 out and 1,000 in. That's all fuel driven. It's also a bit more of a competitive marketplace. When we did UMass Lowell, there were 2 infill turf products on the market in the late 90s. Right now there's about 45. And some are coming and some are going. And the unit cost and the degree of competition between vendors is really pretty acute. And so I think it will be incumbent upon us to help you figure out the implications of those decisions as it relates to the viability of the permits and the budget.
Can I ask 2 follow-up ones?
Yes, sir.
Actually? So to do the first phase, you talked about 20 to 25,000. So is that what you're talking about? Like, could we just design like the first phase of it, or how do?
Yeah,
how does that-
the next phase of the project is design development.
Okay.
That's the real math, science, and engineering. Coming out of schematic design, we're going to know what it is you're going to build. We're going to know what we're going to do with stormwater, what we're going to do to tie in power. We're going to know scoring and timing decisions. We're going to know aesthetically how we want to image and brand the facility. But we haven't done the math, science, and engineering. That's the next phase. That's about 30 grand off the top of my head, and I gave you a fee breakdown. I don't remember what the numbers are. I hope those are okay.
Well, we haven't opened those yet.
That's about 30 grand, and that's the pre and post hydrological modeling that we will need for permitting. That's the site electrical design. That's the stone base design, the concrete curb design, the carpet design, seaming plans, marking plans, striping plans, infill structure, and what and general specifications with regard to the products themselves. That's the next phase. It is that phase that results in buildable documents, plans and specifications, and permitting documents, documents suitable for permit applications.
You covered it all, thanks.
I'm up. Please explain the pros and cons of using different types of infill materials under a synthetic turf field playing service. Please describe your firm's experience working with different types of infill materials.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions, so.
That's
but,
okay.
Yep, what is, related to this, what is the track record for
Yeah,
the most
John.
conventional infill products such as crumb rubber compared to alternative infill products? How can you ensure the field surface will be safe for athletic play and reach or exceed its expected useful life? And last but not least, what are the cost differences between the different types of infill products?
Yep. In your blue binder is a matrix that compares all the various types of infill, and it provides good, hard, recently bid cost data related to those. Yep. Yep.
Oh, sure.
We did the first alternative I will tell you that we haven't done a lot of alternative infill fields, but we've done more than anybody else. Of the 180 some odd fields, we've got 4 that are alternative infill because of community-based decisions. It is our position as a company that conventional infill, tire crumb and silica sand, is safe. And we say that because every government agency that has ever studied it and opined on the relative safety of conventional have come up with that conclusion, every single one. But having said that, it's not for everybody. The first part of the question I'm going to attack is infill design using conventional infill. We've done projects where there are 3 different infill structures within the same project. Dartmouth's baseball stadium, the infield, shorter, denser pile height, a heavier sand fraction because we're concerned about fly up of the rubber on ground balls and small ball response. In the outfield, they're using it for multi-purpose rectangular sports, specifically lacrosse. The infill structure, we're more concerned about shock attenuation and more concerned about footing and head and shoulder injuries. The infill structure is different. It's a full 2-inch depth infill. It's got a 45% sand fraction as opposed to the 60% in the infield. And then there's the warning track. The warning track is supposed to have a tactile difference and a visual difference from surrounding areas. So we put a coke-like material, a pumice-like material in the infill so that there was a tactile difference underfoot. The point of the discussion being that every project is different and there's lots of ways to skin that cat, and we will assuming that you go synthetic, we will configure the infill strategy and structure appropriate for various portions of your field based on how you intend to use it. Now, the broader question is addressing concerns as it relates to chrome rubber, health and environmental safety. John's put up a slide that we can speak to. That, by the way, is a organic cork field after a heavy rainstorm. We've got some real concerns about some of the alternatives that are out there, particularly the organics, in terms of moisture retention, in terms of staph infection propagation, in terms of durability long-term and breakdown and weathering. And one thing about conventional infill, we just did the Curry College replacement project. We are now able to harvest 100% of the infill, clean it, put it in super sacks, replace the carpet, in their case in year 12, and put the infill back 100%. That's not true about the organics, and it's certainly not true about some of the other alternative materials. I'm going to touch on one more topic, and that is helping you advocate for your project with your constituencies should you go synthetic turf. One of the things that we at Gale have done, and I think it is unique to us, is we have fully instrumentized 5 of our projects. What does that mean? Before the project was built, we did a water quality baseline determination looking at adjacent surface waters, downgradient observation wells, downgradient drainage structures, and we tested them for all of the RCRA metals, inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, pH, turbidity, and everything else that we could measure at great expense on our owner's behalf. We then, on a quarterly basis, after the project has built, not only tested all of those sampling points for all of those parameters, but also tested the direct outfall of the drainage structure underneath the field. Again, looking for lead and chromium and zinc and all the other RCRA metals, phosphorus, nitrogen, and all the organic and inorganic chemistry and pH. Over 6 years of doing this, we have not made one single observation of a water quality change to the detriment of the owner. And we can provide you the data for all of those. More importantly, we can provide your constituencies with all of that data. Yes, please. John's Mr. Alternative Info.
Just did. All that being said, so after reading all the scientific reports done by all the different agencies, we do think that chrome rubber is safe. However, we just completed a project in Newburyport where they did the same research we did. They came to the same conclusion, but they said, you know what, there are some folks in town who are concerned about the NBC reports that came out last year. You know, what if, right? So they said, okay, we're not going to do chrome rubber because of the perception, because of the city just doesn't want it. So we did, this is where this blue chart came from. We did lots of research. We did lots of calls.
Brought in vendors.
We brought in vendors. We brought in, we talked to a lot of different athletic directors, some in the Midwest, some in New York State. And what they ended up with our help was they used something called EnviroFill. And this is a sample. It's kind of heavy, so I don't know if we want to pass it around or not. They just played their Thanksgiving Day game.
That if you want, just don't tip it.
Yeah, that's it's a shorter pile height turf. There's a pad below, and it's basically just an acrylically coated sand product. There's no rubber or TPE or EPDM in it. It's the first one in New England. Newburyport loves it. They played one game when it was Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago.
John's working on another alternative infill in Wellesley, Massachusetts right now with Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
And because of environmental constraints inherent in that site, they're going with a TPE, thermoplastic elastomeric, which you have also got a sample of.
We did
I
that
will
field.
tell you that in both those cases, Wellesley, which hasn't gone out to bid yet, and Newburyport, which is just constructed, and the Sprague fields, which were built several years
Mhm.
ago, all of them represent a premium of about $350,000 for the infill fields. The other thing that is represented there is that the pile height of the carpet is significantly less. It's significantly less to mitigate the added cost of the infill. Because the pile height is less, it needs a pad for shock attenuation, adding to the cost. In the gold mouth areas where you've got migration of infill between groomings, if you're starting out with a shorter pile height and you're starting out with less infill, again, to mitigate cost, if you get any migration of the infill at all, you're playing on the backing of the carpet. It's not good for footing, it's not good for wear and tear on the carpet. So it's a very complicated issue, and our job is to provide you good objective consulting with regard to what the alternatives are, what the costs are, what the performance implications are, what the durability implications are, and help you through that decision making. At the end of the day, you're writing the turf spec.
Can I just ask, I see that you've given us the costs in here, but the previous presenter kind of talked about it on a square foot basis? So
So what we've done is it's a lot.
this is like per field, so I was just trying to make sure I'm
The
comparing.
typical field is 100,000 square feet.
somewhere in
That makes the
range.
math easy.
So
Your
that's,
field is 130,000 square feet if you circumscribe the fence line.
Right, your field isn't rectangular, right? If we do
We know.
baseball bump out, right? So to think about it on a square foot basis, it doesn't
the
really do a
different
whole lot
types.
for you, right? If you don't know how big your field is. So
Right.
what we did was we broke it down to an average cost, a typical football soccer field. So
Okay.
in this case, it'd be a little bit more. And what we found is the EnviroFill product that they did in Newburyport was approximately $250,000 above and beyond a typical sand and rubber field. Something like a TPE, that's usually imported from Europe or sometimes now Canada. It's probably more like a $400,000
Okay.
charge. There's some of the organics. There's some like the Nike grind, which is really hard to get right now because they're doing that a lot out in California. It's a little cheaper. That's basically recycled sneakers. But with all of these, you have to be very careful too where it comes from. We've had reports recently of TPE fields where it was of low grade quality and it actually melted on a hot day. So yep, you have to be aware of where it's coming from, and you really have to be on top of the quality control, for sure.
Thank you.
I'm next. The Hull School Committee and Hull Community would like a turf field and walking track that will last as long as reasonably possible.
Yep.
What length warranties are available for the products that you would likely recommend for this type of project?
One of the things that I don't believe in that the Synthetic Turf Council does, and most of the leading manufacturers are members of the Synthetic Turf Council, is set warranties. We really disagree with that. The industry standard warranty for virtually any carpet right now is 8 years. You can purchase additional warranty time from most of the leading vendors for a premium of 10 and maybe even 12 years. What we find is that, and we've done probably 8 carpet replacements of projects that we did in the late 90s and early 2000s already. What we find is that at year 11, in the original genre of carpets, they're failing at 11 years. The UV degradation, it's the same plastic that's in this water bottle. It's the same polyethylene. And if you take that water bottle to the beach and you leave it there for a decade, you come back, you can break it up in your hand. In year 9, fields look pretty good. In year 10, they look okay. And then they fall off the table very abruptly. The degradation curve is very steep after year 10. And every field that we've replaced so far have come out at year 10. Now, there have been several wholesale changes in the UV stabilizers and the shape of the extrusions over the last 15 years since these things have been around that we think are going to lead to more longevity of the carpet. How long, I don't know. The lab data suggests maybe 14 years. And that's kind of what we're telling folks at this point in time. But none of those new extrusions, none of those new UV coatings have been on the ground for that length of time. Everyone's part of the experiment. What's really important to note here, though, is not about the carpet. What's really important to note is that you're building an infrastructure to receive that carpet that should last forever. And you get a chance to get it right. You get a chance to get the drainage right. You get a chance to get the curb right, the concrete curb. More importantly, you get the chance to set all the infrastructure. You should have water at critical points in your field. You should have power at critical points in your field. You should have data. You should have timing and scoring infrastructure in your field. You should have all of that, and it needs to be very well thought through, detailed in a way that it's constructible, buildable economically, and the administration of that construction is really, really important. It's not about the carpet. If you screw up the carpet, you know what? You get to change it in 12 years. If you screw up the infrastructure, particularly the drainage, that's going to haunt you for a very long time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is intended to be a brief answer, just reading from the script. The field playing surface will continue to be used by various sports, such as baseball, field hockey, football, soccer, and lacrosse. How do you determine the height of the grass for multi-purpose fields? Does the height of the grass have any effect on the warranty?
The second part is a very brief answer. No. The height of the grass has no bearing on warranty, unless you were to go below some minimum. We believe at Gale that all fields should start out to be a full 2.5-inch field. How's your carpet going to fail? It's going to fail by breakdown of the fibers and fiber loss. Why would you start with anything else but the industry standard 2.5 inches? I think shorter pile heights are employed by the carpet industry to save money because, frankly, that's the most expensive aspect of the field, particularly with alternative infills, because the infill's so expensive, they modify the pile height to get the infill profile reduced to save significant amounts of money. Our point of departure for almost every field is a full 2.5 inches. Now, fiber is a different issue. If you tell me the most prevalent sport is soccer, that's going to lean us toward a pure monofilament. If you tell us that the most important sport is baseball, that's going to lead us to something called a slit film, because now I'm concerned about small ball response, mitigating the fly up and performance. If you tell me that it's going to be a true multi-purpose rectangular field that accommodates a lot of different sports, we're going to look at hybrids. We're going to look at dual fibers profiles of the carpet. Again, infill can be modified within the area of the project to accommodate sports in specific areas. So each field is going to be tuned to the needs of your constituencies. That's as short as I can make it.
I have the next question. The original schedule as specified in the RFP was intended to see if the project could reasonably be completed for the fall 2016 season and maintain the high level of quality both the owner and designer would expect from this project. Would you recommend any change to the schedule at this point? If so, what is the benefit of such change and what would be the impact on the price of the project? So if we were to change the schedule, maybe perhaps go to the fall, like what's your opinion on that?
First, I'm going to let John talk about the schedule as we have laid it out. In your binder is a full critical path method schedule for the design, the permitting, the fabrication, and construction.
So, like Bill said, we'll start with what we propose, and I can answer your question based off of that, just to give you a sense of what the life of one of these projects is from cradle to grave, from existing conditions survey through playing your first game. And what we proposed was that notice to proceed essentially today, going through the survey, programming, and schematic design through February, applying for permits, which is probably going to be a notice of intent permit and possibly permit for site plan or light tower variance in March. And this schedule also assumes a concurrent bid is permitting, pink line, your major bidding in your construction award. So in order to start construction this summer and to play on it in the fall, you need to overlap that roughly 60-day period, which there is some risk in doing, and our job is to minimize that risk with good documents and meeting with the permitting agencies up front so we can figure out what their hot button issues are going to be so that they don't bite us during bidding. If we were to wait and do permitting, say, in the summertime, after town meeting perhaps, and really figure out the full detailed design, that would be that 60-day period. So let's assume maybe June, July, August. Now you're bidding it August, September, and you're really not breaking ground until September, October, and now you're getting into fall and winter construction. If you want to do any sort of track surfacing, that has a weather dependency. Gluing down the edge of the turf has a weather dependency, 40 degrees and rising. So as you get a little bit later in the season, we've been very lucky this year, but in past years clearly it's been a challenge. So once you start getting out of that summer construction mode, you really start taking some chances with the weather and what you can do.
Thanks.
But in general, the pricing
Yeah,
better?
that's where I was going to go next. Thank you. The project schedule that we've prepared for you is consistent with your stated schedule intent. You are just on time, and I think I was pretty definitive in my answer to your earlier question about could we put this off and still hope to get something done in 2016. The answer is no. You are just in time, and even now it necessitates, in our opinion, concurrent permitting and bidding of the work. If something came out of the permitting scenario to modify the bidding documents, before award we do that by addendum, after award we do that by change order. Now, this project is in the contractor's sweet spot. I would say 70 to 75% of all turf track projects get built according to this schedule. As a result, we want to get your project out to bid as early in the queue as we can. John, can you tell me when the bid date was?
Yeah, it was in this kind of slide here. So
Yeah.
it was in March, middle of March, I believe.
Yeah, so that's absolutely as late as you would want to bid it. We would prefer to bid it in February, 30 days sooner. And we may be able to accelerate that to some degree if you're decisive and we give you good, clean alternatives. If you bid the job in the fall, with a fall start, you will get better pricing, but you may pay a premium for demobilizing and remobilizing through the winter time, depending on the winter. If you bid it in the fall for a spring start and you're willing to give up spring sports, which is another whole topic of discussion, that's probably optimal pricing. The contractors, there's about 8 contractors in New England that will bid this work. Some of them are very good, and some of them are classic Massachusetts public bidders. And I'll let it go at that. Our job is to try to write a specification that's performance-based and get you a really good contractor for a very competitive number. But yeah, those are all good discussions about when you bid it and the implications of schedule. Right now, if you're going to build something in 2016, we are convinced you're on schedule.
As indicated in the Central Register posting in the RFP, there is a not-to-exceed budget for this project of $100,000. Will all invoices submitted related to this project not exceed the project budget? If no, what are the additional expenses and additional costs?
Our fee is certainly below that, and I don't know if you want to go into detail on that or not until you open them. There could be expenses that we can't anticipate until we get into permitting. Does the town hire a third-party reviewer for the hydrology and drainage? Does the town hire a third-party environmental consultant? Those are things that get factored into your budget. Our fee, and I assume that application for those permits would be, the fee would be waived. Our fee, to include the one sub-consultant that we would use for site electrical, is well below that number.
Great, thank you.
I can envision scenarios where there are direct expenses to you as a result of the permitting process and various review requirements where you may bust that number.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm next. Sometimes the owner does not have the information you are seeking. Please give an example or two of how you have handled this situation that kept the project on schedule, on budget, and maintained the overall value of the work performed for the owner.
I can't imagine a scenario for this project where the type of information that we need isn't something that we can measure. We're going to measure property line. We're going to measure topography. We're going to measure the other existing improvements on the site. We're going to take you through a programming discussion and help you make good decisions with regard to program. We'll set the conditions for you to give us an answer. So I can't think of a scenario for a project of this type where that's the case.
One of the main things we would ask for,
Yeah, thank you, John.
to have, is the existing conditions as-built plan of the school, so we can see where utilities should be. We already have it.
Take the, no, that's because they
You
can't
can-
hear it
you
on the
can pull it
TV.
out.
You can pull it out, yeah.
I'll repeat, just one of the crucial things that we typically want the owner to provide for us, if possible, is the as-built plan. So we know where underground utilities are, things we can't see. We could camera inspect them, we could, trace them, do ground penetrating radar, things like that. But we already have that plan, the record plan. We're going to vet this with survey and visually observe and make sure that it looks accurate. But that's typically the big piece of the puzzle right there.
Okay, thank you.
We don't expect you to tell us about soils. We're going to do some direct observation of soils and lab testing. It's in our fee. There's not going to be any mystery here. As you know, 75% of change orders derive from the engineer's failure to ascertain the prevailing site conditions, always. And if you do that more than you should, you're not in business very long. We're not relying on you to give us a lot of that information.
Thanks.
Short answer questions for the proposed project manager. How many years have you been project manager for outdoor athletic facilities?
18.
18. And you would be the project
I'm the
manager?
project manager for this one. I don't manage a lot of projects. John is a project manager on a couple. Jeff will be. We have a couple of other project managers. This is a project that I've been involved with I think 5 years or 6 years since I've dialogued or provided information or done some sketching, whatever. This is, and it's close, and I'm lazy, it's close to home. But I would be your project manager, and I've managed probably 200, 225 high school athletic campus redevelopments.
So, how many projects have you completed in that time? Answered. How many of those projects did you receive an award for?
About 20. And the list is in your folder.
Do you hold an MCPPO certification for designers?
John and I both do.
Okay, back to me. In your role as project manager for an athletic field and track, please share with us the worst and best experience both you and an owner had on the job. What did you learn that you can apply to make sure that it's similar situation here at home?
I think the worst one is, it's an interesting one, Curry College. And my client is a guy by the name of Bob O'Connell, who is the facilities manager at Curry. This was our first assignment at Curry. We were relatively new at stone-based construction. We specified the right stone. We received submittals on the stone that met our specification. We received certificates from the quarry with the delivery slips that met the submittal, that met our specification. What was delivered was fundamentally different. We specified 2% fines passing the 200 sieve, and we find that that's the threshold at which fields begin to lock up and not drain well. And this stone had 8% fines in it, and it wasn't apparent to touch. And we didn't take grab samples, and we didn't test it ourselves. And it locked up tighter than a drum, and it never drained properly. The contractor was RAD Sports out of Rockland, a really good sports contractor. They had no visibility of the stone being bad. We did the forensic investigation to find out what the heck is going on. We didn't probably do a real good job doing infiltration testing in situ before the carpet went down. As a result of that, RAD and we, to the tune of $15,000 apiece, split the cost of putting in some expedient drainage down the sidelines of the field and left the carpet in place. We've done, and it performed well. We've done 5 more projects at Curry since then. John was just the project manager for the site engineering for a new dormitory at Curry. We have since done the carpet replacement, and as part of that, we wholesale replaced the stone. Since then, we take grab samples of every single job that we do. And we do we observe the infiltration testing of every single job that we do. That was a painful one. We stood by it. We did nothing wrong except not verify what was put in. We spec'd it right, we designed it right, we reviewed the shop drawing and the submittal, we reviewed the delivery slips. We didn't do that last piece, and it cost us. And I'm so glad that we stood at attention and fixed it with our partner, the contractor, because Curry's absolutely one of our best clients. And that's the story. The best experience has to be probably, I'm torn. The Mass Youth Soccer Complex is a 16-field, FIFA-sized field in Lancaster, Massachusetts. It routinely hosts 10,000-person tournaments. It was well-funded. It was delivered 6 months early, despite equipment going for 4 days and rebuilding Gillette Stadium in the middle of the project, but that's another story. It was circumscribed by very well-heeled abutters. It was circumscribed by very pristine environmental receptors: vernal pools, floodplains, perennial streams, bordering vegetated wetland. And I think that our design was an award-winning design. I think our design, and I think the construction, again by RAD, as it turns out, same company, could not have been more successful. And it was just a great success story all the way around. Great piece of land other than the environmental constraints. Great budget.
Once construction begins, who can we expect to see on the job site on a daily or weekly basis?
I certainly will do the weekly site meetings and the weekly site visits as the project manager. If there are environmental issues, erosion control, sedimentation control, it could be Maggie. If there are plants to be tagged, It could be Jeff for the landscaping statement. So it could be any number of the folks on the team. Our best field engineer is a young man by the name of Sean Boyd, who is a good field tech. But it could be all of us, but it will routinely be me,
How often can we expect to see you?
weekly.
And then how frequently will the contractor submittals be reviewed and recommended for payment by your firm for this job?
Whenever they're submitted. Contractors routinely submit them monthly. But the first thing that we do is we get a progress schedule from the contractor. We vet that. We get a schedule of values from the contractor. We vet that. We get a submittals register. Here's all the submittals I owe you and when I intend to submit them and where we are in that process. We vet that. Payment requests come on a monthly basis. We review them for completion of the work in accordance with the plans and specifications and give you a recommendation for approval.
Okay, thank you.
We check schedule of values to make sure that they're not front-loaded. That's the biggest deficiency that we typically see. At the pre-construction conference, we tell the contractor, if you do that, we're just gonna hand it back to you, so don't. But that's the process.
How will your firm make sure all of the annual and seasonal preventative maintenance tasks the manufacturer recommends for the equipment and systems in the project get communicated to the owner?
A couple things. First of all, unlike some others, in our specifications, we require annual inspections of the field by the contractor. You pay for that up front. At the 6-month anniversary of the delivery, we do the first shakedown inspection. We look at all the seams, we look at the level of infill, we look at the GMAX testing again, because then the field will have settled in, so we know shock attenuation values are more valid. And you also own that same follow-up inspection on an annual basis over the life of the warranty in accordance with our specifications. At closeout, we have a closeout checklist that we prepare in conjunction with the punch list. And in it, we include things like the groomer training. The contractor provides training on the groomer. We make sure that you have shop stock in terms of infill, sand, and rubber, and that it's stored properly, because these come in super sacks that are very, very subject to UV degradation. After a couple of years, they just come apart, and you see piles of sand and rubber in the middle of your complex. But we make sure that you've got shop stock to do the dressing of the goal mouth areas when you groom the field. I think in terms of whether or not and we also give you instruction on plowing the field, and we design the field to be plowed in terms of the location of gates and the identification of snow storage areas. And the type of gate. Obviously, you don't do swing gates if you're intending to plow. You do roll gates. And they have to be at critical locations for plowing. We think that through with you. Based on the maintenance training and the plowing training, you get a full maintenance binder with that training, and the annual follow-up inspections, which can provide some refresher training in making sure that you're doing that correctly.
Great, thank you.
At this point, do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't think so.
All right then. Feel free make a closing statement to
Sure.
kind of wrap this up. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
We might have one.
Yeah, I got one
Quick
other
follow-up
question
question
for you. One of the things maybe I don't understand this properly, but, so I'm looking at this document here that you pulled up.
Yep.
It's kind of like the schedule.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the pink area, the bidding process.
Yes.
So, one of my concerns is right off the bat. So you have the bidding scheduled for like the very beginning of March to go out to bid.
Yes.
And then you have the advertising, you have the bids come back, the review of the bids, and then you have construction award on like April 25th, but we wouldn't have had town meeting by then, so, I mean, I know we can.
Then you cannot.
Yes. So
you
that's-
cannot.
So, yeah, so that's, the only thing is that the schedule seems like it's almost, we're going too quick almost. We can actually get the bids and then maybe
Yep.
kind of sit on them and,
Yep.
I mean, I guess I'm looking for you for some guidance. on
Sure. The bids are good for 60 days. You can ask the contractor to extend them by mutual agreement, but that becomes an issue. Obviously, you have to have 100% of the base bid amount on account and obligatable in order to make an award. You can advertise, you can open bids, you can review the bids without the money in hand. But in order to make an award, you're absolutely right. You have to have 100% of the money on account, fully obligatable.
Could I ask, what do you mean by on account? Is that different from, this
The
will be
funds have to be
activated when you have
certified, the funds have to be certified on account by your
Town
treasurer or
council.
business manager.
so if, say, we have a town election on May 16th, and assuming the debt exclusion passes, how long will you go from that vote to having those funds on account?
That's a question that you guys have to answer. I don't know your inner workings and how you can make that happen.
I want to add to that because
Well, it looks like it's not that bad really, because you would get the bids back on April 25th, and then we have town meeting on the 16th.
The election, actually,
Oh, the
not town
election or
meeting,
whatever.
sorry.
If you go to
Sorry
the
about that.
first
So-
tasks in the black text there were based on, the contract award was based, April 25th, because that just falls in line nicely after bid review coming back on April 18th. However, you see the first few tasks there have the pre-construction conference, shop drawing review, submittal review,
Right.
things like that. So, and then you skip down to line item number 50, mobilization, actually, getting the contractor out there. That's not until May 24th. So there's that, month of a window between where you actually award the contract based on this schedule
Right.
and when they'd actually be out there doing some work. So that's your 30 days worth of wiggle room there to have your town meeting, in my opinion. And then the rest of this would roughly fall in line with your project closeout towards the end of September.
Okay.
So I think that town meeting end of May, did you say?
May
Middle of May?
16th?
May
May
16th?
16th will be
It's
the
the
town
election,
election.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's
built into this.
that's fine.
Well, I think
yeah.
we're all right anyways, because I think the bids are due on the 25th of April. We have the election on May 16th, but that's only like 2 or 3 weeks away.
That's wonderful.
And
To be able
that's-
to
So-
walk into town meeting with bids in hand and an awardable project
So-
is huge.
With the 60 days, we should be,
Right.
we should be in.
So
I just wanted to make
exactly,
sure
so
we were
you-
all clear on that part.
So you have
That's
you'll have
important.
real numbers walking into your town meeting,
Okay.
and then you'll have a week or two to actually make the award. You can have that contract sitting there on the shelf,
Right.
and then the day after town meeting, you can actually have pen to paper and get them started, still on track with this schedule, in my opinion.
Very good. Good answer. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, John. So, very quickly.
I'm sorry, we have
Question.
another quick follow-up.
I think you mentioned that there were probably 8 contractors that do this type of work that we're looking for. Since the summer is the busy schedule, are we coming kind of late to the game if we're waiting till?
If you
like-
bid the job the first week in March, you're not late to the game.
But we're not gonna be able to really do that because we have to wait for the
No,
town.
that's when you make an award. Their bids are going to be predicated on when you advertise.
Okay, so they could give us the bid, but then they
They
could
will
go.
still be in a competitive mode. They will still be figuring out how to fill their dance card the first week in May, not first week in March.
In March, and so, in their dance card,
Yes.
if we can't give them an answer to their dance card like that, they're gonna start pulling away their,
They can't. They
Can't?
have a bid bond that they submit with their
Okay.
bid, and for 60 days, you own that number, which will have been compiled in a very competitive setting.
okay, and can they do multiple bids at a time, is that?
Do they? Absolutely. Each contractor will do 4 or 5 projects, and I'm generalizing, obviously, some are more robust than others. But the top-tier sports contractors, these aren't guys that build parking lots. The top-tier sports contractors will each do 4 or 5 significant projects next summer. You want to be at the front end of their bidding season, because at the end of the bidding season, they're just throwing stupid numbers out there trying to, and if they happen to prevail, they'll find a way to get it done.
So if we get the bids in March 1st, then we're okay.
Yes, I would say much later than that, though. We would prefer to get the job out to bid in mid-February. But again, that's going to require you to be pretty decisive. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
I guess it brings up a few other questions. I'm
No, go ahead.
This whole process, so.
If that's okay with everybody else.
So if we put the bid process out
Yep.
on March 1st,
Yep.
60 days from then is May 1st?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we can't give an answer or do anything with the bids yet until May 16th?
It's
So
from
when
the, we advertise on March 1st, but that clock doesn't start ticking until the bid opening,
Okay, and so when does that happen?
30 days after March 1st.
Okay, and then we have 60 days.
Mhm.
Why do people wait 30 days to open the bid opening?
Because by law, you have to have the project advertised for a certain number of weeks.
Okay,
And usually there are typically addenda based on questions or based on observations, requests for information or clarifications that may extend the bid another week. So we typically say 30 days.
all right. Another question,
Mhm.
again. So we do that, that gives us enough time. Do we, I'm trying to think how, what if it doesn't pass? And now, is that kind of an unfavorable, next time they won't want to bid? I don't know, is there an impact, is there a negative impact
This
if we
this
move
is a
forward and then we can't
for,
move forward?
for lack of a better term, this is a very sexy project. This is 130 square feet of turf, probably a lighting, perhaps a lighting package, perhaps a fencing package, perhaps something of an entrance statement, scoring and timing, maybe some dugouts and backstop. This is a significant project. Regardless of when you were to put it back out to bid, the same guys would still fight over it, is my opinion.
Thank you.
Yep. If you did it 5 times, you know, it might get a little old, but, anything else?
I think
So,
we're good.
I'm not gonna take a lot of time. This is in your handout. This is the roadmap by which we provide professional services for projects of this type. And we've talked about most of it. We've talked about the background investigation, the program development, the base plan development, schematic planning, where we give you a bunch of alternatives to include grass and turf, and vet those with you and help you reach a consensus decision as to what's the best and highest use of your resources. We then do design development, which is all the math, science, and engineering, and our solutions are very buildable, very pragmatic, and we know what they cost. We've talked about permitting, we've talked about bid period services, and we've talked about rather comprehensive construction period services to include all the closeout things that you talked about. As-built, certifications of compliance, punch list, warranties, and training. All right, be that way. We've talked about the schedule in detail. I'm not going to revisit it. I think the important thing to remember is that there's a lot of lead times here for fabrication. If there's lights, if there's bleachers, and your carpet, all of those are custom made, and that 35 to 40 days has to be built into your schedule. Keys to success, we've talked about a lot of them. You hit upon a lot of them. Detailed understanding of the prevailing site conditions always, 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 always is first for projects of this type. Managing fiscal realities and having good bid alternates to give you maximum flexibility in making an award down the road. You're a public client, that's always going to be required. Help building community consensus and advocacy. And we don't have a dog in the fight. We don't care if it's turf or grass. We're not turf consultants, we're not grass consultants. We're sports facilities consultants, and those are tools in our kit bag. Regardless of what direction you go in, we'll help you build community advocacy and public opinion. Again, the infrastructure is hugely important. You get one opportunity to get it right. And I'll let it go at that. John didn't really touch on sustainable solutions, but when it comes time and you want to talk about how we make these things sustainable and how we do stormwater treatment and erosion and sedimentation control and how we facilitate getting permits, again, Maggie can help you with that discussion. Why us? There's no consultant that has done this as often as we and learned as much in the process as we. There's no consultant whose services are as well integrated as ours in terms of the maturity and stability of our staff, the interoperability of our staff. We know how to get through this process. More importantly, we know how to help your community get through this process. There's no consultant that's as local as we. Again, we all live within 10, 15 miles of here. and our office is in Weymouth. But most importantly, if you looked at the projects that I showed you as references, the majority of our clients are Massachusetts public high schools. We are all MCPPO certified. You are our client of choice. These opportunities are very rare, and projects of this type are particularly rare. We'll try very hard for you. Thank you. Subject to your questions, have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. This point, we want to take a quick recess? Yeah, we'll take a quick recess again to let you back up. Thank you.
Hey, it was very nice to meet you. Yeah.
I think it's part of sitting.